Yeah, so let me sort of kick off. So, just to answer. So, in terms of my background, so I've got 12 years plus experience, should I say, in talent acquisition, both from what we would call an agency background, um, where I started my career in the UK,
Mhm.
to where I am now, which is an in-house role, where I look after talent acquisition for Snap, for the MENA region. So that's sort of my beginning and the end in between, sort of for various agencies across the UK and in the MENA region, as well as a couple of in-house roles, one within biotech and pharma, with Amgen, again where I was leading their talent
Mhm.
acquisition efforts for MENA, and now I work in the tech space, for Snap.
All right, that's interesting. But can you tell me a little bit more about your responsibilities, the things that you really do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, sure. So, what does my role entail? I guess um, it on a day-to-day basis, it's sort of um, managing my key stakeholders, um, and their needs, for the region. So, I work with our senior leadership team and really understanding, okay, where are the gaps within their teams, where
Mm.
they feel they might be requiring new headcount, what that headcount looks like, and then coming up with a plan of action or a strategy, in terms of how we're going to find this talent, and how
Mm.
does that talent sort of come to Snap. um, Specifically at Snap, we're very particular in who we hire. So it's the benchmark is very high, and as a result, we end up sort of interviewing a lot more candidates than I would have previously,
Mm.
to um, to sort of ensure that we're maintaining that benchmark. So, my stakeholders are quite picky, and we need to make sure that the people that we're bringing into the organization, um, fit the culture, as well as having the technical capabilities. And I think that
Mm.
cultural fit, technical capability sometimes is a given, but the cultural fit is the harder part to sort of ascertain during the interview process. And I think that fit, is something that we're looking for on a day-to-day basis. Besides that, my sort of responsibilities, I report into the UK, so I have a reporting line into the UK, as well as my leadership team, in the MENA region. So there's projects which we're managing from a global perspective, that we're implementing across the region, and also the day-to-day sort of talent headhunting, should I say.
Mhm.
Um, so that's sort of in a nutshell, I guess, what my role entails.
That seems like a very tough job, like to please everybody at the same time. Like,
It
please.
is. It is.
So, how do you keep this relationship with stakeholders? Like, how does it look like?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you touch a good point. In terms of like the stakeholders, they are demanding, and obviously we want to sort of fill these roles, or find the talent, should I say, as quickly as possible, so that they can start making an impact, on the organization, and on that particular role that we're hiring for.
Yeah.
Um, so I think there's a sort of a speed versus quality,
Mm.
um, dilemma here. Do you try and move quickly, or do you continue looking for the right talent until you found the right quality? Um, so it's always hard to find that balance. The I think the biggest factor here with stakeholders is managing expectations and understanding their expectations. So, if they have a massive, checklist and want list, that I want X, Y, and Z, plus
Mm.
this, plus that, plus that. My job is to really be realistic with them and sit them down and say, hang on, does this person exist in the world, or in MENA, or in Saudi, for example. And if it does, what are the realistic timelines that do you think we'll be able to find this person? And I think you've been in the MENA region previously as well. There is ample talent that wants to work in this region, but there's always in terms of quality, sometimes there is a big differential in terms of what the business needs and what the talent availability is. So there's a lot of, like, we need to really be careful on who we bring. Snap is a very young organization, and even in MENA we're only 6 years old. So we started with 5 people 6 years ago, and now we're about 100 people. So it's still a very family centric culture, should I say. Everybody knows most people know their kids' names, or their dogs' names, and so it's quite close knit environment. So we need to make sure that people can blend into that culture quite well. At the same time, it's an aggressive business. We are fast growing year on year. We're trying to grow by 40-50%, which also is sort of like a work hard, play hard sort of culture. People are the job is demanding. Whichever job you're in, whether you're in sales, or whether you're in HR, or whether you're in finance, the job is demanding.
Definitely.
But the culture sort of is very family centric, so that sort of helps to balance the demands of the job, I guess.
So you, as an talent acquisition lead, do you prefer to make the process a little bit faster, or do you prefer to wait to get the perfect candidate? Which one do you prefer?
So sorry, I'm just making a note here. So it's a good question you ask. You see, my aim is to find the best candidate for the business. And if that takes long, I'm okay with it. What I don't want to be in a situation, and something that some organizations measure talent acquisition on, is attrition rates within the first 6 months of hiring somebody. And I would rather have a situation where we might take a bit longer to hire somebody, but we've hired the right person for the role, who can make an impact to the business. I think there is a cost element of having a bad hire, right? Because if you have a bad hire, they join the business, and if they don't, if they can't make an impact, then you've lost 3 to 6 months worth of time already. And B, again, if they come from a toxic mindset, then they can sort of have an impact on the rest of the team. So I think quality of hire is important, but at the same time, I think sometimes hiring managers need to take risks on people, and I think we perhaps dwell on candidates too much. There's a lot of, let me think about this person, and it takes a week, 10 days, 2 weeks to think about, is this person right for the fit for the business, which is okay. But at some point, when you've exhausted all of your options in the market and you've got 1 or 2 people, then we need to be a bit more direct. How can I put it?
Strict.
We need to be straight in our decision making. We need to write, okay, we've done our due diligence and search for three months or whatever it is. So I think at some point there reaches that exhaustion point where you need to make a decision on what you're going to do, rather than just ponder. And it's also some hiring managers, I think, they sometimes want to continue seeing more talent, benchmark against more talent. And as TA, my role is to say, hang on a minute, and obviously based on data and based on the work that we do, that we've exhausted the market, and now you need to make a call on who you want to hire. Or, we move the role somewhere else, or you change your needs and your wants about this role. So be a bit more flexible in whether we're hiring an Arabic speaker or not, or whether we're hiring a Saudi national or not, or things like that. So I think at some point you need to sort of put your hand up and say, we've done our bit, or I've done my bit, and I'm confident of that because of X, Y, and
Mm.
Z. I've got a list of people that we've approached and people who've applied and etc. So I think if the process flow, or if your talent acquisition processes um, are tight, then you can
Mm.
then go back to the business and say, right, I've done my bit. Now either you make a decision or you change your requirements.
Exactly.
So I think there does come that point, at some point in that process, based on the difficulty of the role, I will make that judgment call and say, right, you know what, you need to make a call on this
Mm.
person or not, or we look somewhere else, or we change the requirements of the job.
But that puts a lot of pressure on you. Like I feel that from the description or the things that you have said is like it puts a lot of pressure on you to find the right person and also at the right time and not take a long time to hire
Yeah,
somebody.
yeah.
Seems like
Yeah,
a lot.
it is a pressurized job, but obviously we have a very good interview process in play where different stakeholders will get involved and interview these talents as well, and
Mm.
they give their opinion. So my role is sort of like, once I've done my interviews with these candidates and I sort of pass them over to the hiring manager, I sort of like say, right here, let's start
Yeah,
running the
you
interview
step back.
process, and 3 or 4 rounds of interviews, and then I get the collated feedback, and that's when we start sort of like, okay, understanding if this person's going to be the right fit or not. So, but yeah, there is pressure, and obviously sometimes when there's volume, when you're hiring 20, 25 roles at the same time, senior level roles, there's a lot of pressure. Like you're trying to wear multiple hats, and
Mm.
you're doing 10, 12 interviews a day, and
Mhm.
it does get quite a pressurized role.
All right. So, can you please tell me a little bit more about this thing that is very popular at the moment, which is diversity, equitability, and
Yeah,
inclusive hiring. This is
yeah.
something that is it's a topic that is very hot topic at the moment. Everybody's talking about it. So, how do you manage that with your hiring process?
It's a good question. Let me sort of rewind a little bit. So DEI for Snap is very, very important. Um, we publish something called DAR goals, which is basically our global diversity goals across the world on what we're trying to achieve, and that's published every year in the UK. Um, and that basically says that we want, like, for example, 25% of women in leadership. We want 25% of management to come from uh, underrepresented groups. So that could be people of color, people of
Mhm.
differing um,
Cultural background.
cultural backgrounds, or people from like LBGT communities or etc. So we publish all these goals, and as an organization, we're really striving to sort of achieve those goals. And they're not massive. We're not saying we want the 50% of the
Mhm.
population. It's around 20, 25% is what we're aiming for, but we're still not there. We're not even achieving that at the
Yeah.
moment. And for example, in the US, there's a lot of pressure to make sure that you know people from ethnic backgrounds are being given the right opportunities. People from Hispanic backgrounds are given the right opportunities. And I think
Yeah.
it's the case of moving away from this historic mindset of management has to be white and male. So we're trying to sort of shift the needle on that, and making sure that you know we're giving or looking for talent, should I say, um, who come from different backgrounds. And I think that diversity that comes into the organization also brings diversity of thought, and a new level of creativity. Um, one of our values is creativity. So we strongly believe that sort of brings the
Mm.
people from different backgrounds will help the organization grow and be creative in the future. So I guess that's the background. How we're trying to do it is a challenge in itself.
Mhm.
We are proactively in our recruitment processes having checkpoints where we are making sure that we have people from DI backgrounds in that funnel or in that process. So, for example, if I've interviewed 10 people for the first round, I need to make sure that 50% of that come from a DEI background. So that
Mhm.
could be women, that could be people of color, people from different backgrounds. And again, making sure that in the second round, let's say there's five candidates, again 50% or more are from DEI backgrounds, and we're trying to
But
sort of make sure that
but do you think this is fair? Like, do you think that trying to include all people from different backgrounds and from different ethnicity and sexual orientation is is fair, like fair for the process, or do you really think that you should just look for their abilities and what they can bring to
yeah,
the
it's a very good question. So I think we still hire for the best ability, right?
exactly.
That doesn't change. But what we're trying to make sure is that as TA, we are presenting enough options
Hmm.
for the hiring manager to be able to hire um, a person who could be from a DI
Yeah.
background, right? And I think it comes down to it comes down to your unconscious bias and your mindset here. Like if as a hiring manager you've got a mindset that this person can only be done by a white male, and you are only going to look at that,
Hmm.
then the whole process is sort of skewed towards one background
Yeah.
or one person or one type of person. But if as TA we are able to demonstrate that actually there is talent out there who could be benchmarked against what your mind is thinking,
Yes.
um, and at every stage of the process, these talents from underrepresented groups are given equal opportunities to progress through the process, then I think at the final stage, the hiring manager has a choice where actually there is somebody here in a bucket, or there is somebody here, a pool of talent which can do the job, but from a DEI background, and
Mhm.
actually there's somebody here who's my typical person. So we are actually putting pressure on hiring managers as well, and then
Yeah.
targeting them as well. Look, they do need to diversify their teams. So there is a sort of a bonus driven target that their bonuses are going to be sort of paid out based on how diverse their own teams are.
Mm.
So again, it's that mindset shift that we're trying to create from the top down, um, and it is working. We are making progress. It's just the first year we're sort of focusing on this, but it's a big topic. It's a big topic, not just at Snap, but globally. Our peers in the tech industry are doing their own ways of doing this, but again, they're
Mm.
targeted.
Do you
Some
think
have to
this
be
is
even report to the New York Stock Exchange and London Stock Exchange. So it's a
yeah?
big sort of like pressure on the organization.
So
Sorry,
you
you were
think
asking.
that, so you think that this brings success to the organization when you proceed
Yes,
that
yeah. So yeah, absolutely, I do. So just to give you an example, this year I've hired 75% female candidates
Mhm.
for the organization, which is brilliant because our our cohort for MENA, we were skewed 65% male, 40% female, or
Yeah.
something along those lines. So by bringing in more female talent, I'm now able to bring that balance into the organization.
Mm.
So and that came on the back of putting pressure on hiring managers, but also proactively
Yeah.
looking for the talent that is out there, but making sure they're given the right opportunity to succeed through the interview process.
All right. So I believe this is a very hot topic. Like everybody's talking about it.
Yeah.
How do you keep yourself updated with all the trends and the things and the resources that you know that you are like that keeps you updated with all these things that coming up?
Yeah, so it's again a very good question. Look, I think post-COVID, the world has moved very much online and digital, and
Mm.
I think you've got now opportunities to join webinars
Yeah.
to join conferences virtually. So we do a lot of that. We try and sort of like whenever there's DEI events and stuff like that, we do a lot of that.
Yeah.
We
Totally.
have a very strong, we also have a very strong DEI team internally who consistently update us of, the
Mhm.
latest regulations, the latest sort of
Yeah.
trends in the market. We actively, or should I say, proactively monitor what our competition is doing to make sure that we are on top of our A game.
Yes, of course.
So that's also a thing. And I think, also the business is now starting to see the results that actually we can hire people from diverse talent backgrounds. And, I think it's just a matter of time now, once these people are in place and up and running, is to see the impact they have on the organization. So I think there's a
Mm.
sort of a lag period of 6 months to a year where we'll be able to see and measure actually
Mm.
what these DEI background talents are bringing to the organization as well. So I think the results should speak for themselves over the next 6 to 12 months.
All right. So, okay, so you keep yourself updated and try as much as possible to stay
Yeah.
in the loop with everything going on in this world when it comes to DIA. And I just want to ask you, like, what do you think are the key qualities to be a very successful talent acquisition lead? Like, what do you think
Yeah.
the qualities?
One it's a difficult one because my manager might measure me on these qualities. But look, I think what I've learned over my last 12 years of experience. And remember, I used to be an agency, on the agency side as well. So I used to deal with clients, and clients used to pay me money for my services. So
Mhm.
when I bring that experience to in-house, I think one of the biggest things that I think has helped me is managing that stakeholders and expectations. I think the minute the minute a stakeholder feels that you're not keeping them updated, you're not communicating to them, they feel you're slacking. So I think even if you're struggling to find the right person, just letting them know what the issues are and managing those expectations, that this is taking longer than expected and the reasons why, they will understand. So I think managing expectations is one of the biggest qualities, and being
Yeah.
able to push back, right? And I have these conversations even with my regional GM, who is a very, very senior person. But it'd be able to, when he comes to me and says, why haven't we filled this role? And I can demonstrate, well, actually, we've interviewed 25 candidates, but this is the challenge, or the hiring manager's being too picky, or, the market is really challenging because we're looking for a Saudi national, or we're looking for an Arabic speaker.
Mm.
But being able to have those conversations and back yourself, but at the same time be able to push back and say, well, hang on, what we're looking for
Mm.
exists or doesn't exist for various reasons. So it goes down to sort of being, I guess, confident in the work that you're doing, um, but at the same time managing the stakeholder piece. I think the rest will fall in place, but the stakeholders, if they're not happy with you, that can determine the success or the
Yeah.
failure of your role.
So I believe
So I think it's keeping them happy and keeping them updated and managing their expectations is the key part of this role.
that it is the key quality to be a successful acquisition lead, but also it is the challenge, like the
Yeah,
challenge that you face on a day-to-day basis when it
yeah,
comes to
yeah,
um,
yeah.
your
I,
work.
I I mean, a lot of talent acquisition people, and I see this with my peers, they are very data centric. They want to
Yeah.
look at metrics and what's your time to fill and what's your time to hire, and how many months does it take for somebody to be onboarded, and we look at that as a given, like that's a sort of a
Baseline.
benchmark in itself,
Yeah.
like that's a baseline that you should be doing anyways.
Mhm.
But that doesn't determine, and going back to this whole time versus quality, I think we would prefer, if it takes longer to fill roles, the
Mm.
quality is more important. So and different organizations approach it differently. Obviously, if you're hiring for 5,000 people a year, then all of those metrics are a bit more valuable. But when you're hiring 20, 25 roles a year, it's more about quality. So I think
definitely.
each role will determine how as a TA you need to adapt.
Yeah.
And if it's volume, then I would be purely looking at metrics.
Yes, of course.
Right? But when it's a quality service that the business wants,
You have to be niche and you have to target like
yeah,
specific people, and yeah. So I believe
exactly.
that you have to be flexible in your role. You have to understand also the stakeholders mindset, but also manage the hiring process in a very logical and a little bit more
Yeah,
personal way. So you have to be flexible. Okay, so I have one last question.
sure.
What can you give? What kind of advice would you give to young people who would like to take this role as an acquisition lead or talent acquisition lead? Like, what kind of advice would you give them to be successful?
Yeah, yeah. Um, it's a good question. Um,
If you have to summarize them in, like, summarize one thing.
yeah, yeah. I think look, reaching this stage comes with experience. You need to, if you're gonna if you want to do a talent acquisition role or eventually become a talent acquisition lead, um, as your sort of your career plan and your career trajectory, I think you need to sort of take on the right experiences. So, in my case, I did agency work, which sort of prepared me for
Mm.
in-house. And the agency field was very demanding, highly pressurized. You're dealing with multiple clients and multiple
Yeah.
days, multiple times. So I think that molds you as a person. And when you're working on the agency side, there's a level of customer service that is expected that you give to your
Mhm.
client. So that when you bring on to that
Yeah.
mindset when you bring on the in-house really helps. But I think because the role is or the role can be so challenging in different ways, I think the biggest quality I would say that somebody needs to have is being resilient.
Yeah.
There will always be being resilient and secondly managing ambiguity. There will always be
Mm.
challenges in an organization. Things might not go to plan. You might be told, I get things changing on a day-to-day basis. I'll just give you an
Mhm.
example. Like, we started the year, having a number of vacancies all of a sudden, and then come June, we've decided to pause hiring. But all of that, there's lots of changes happening at the
Mhm.
top end, and you need to be able to manage that ambiguity. And if somebody gets flustered or frustrated when things change and things are out of their
Yeah.
control, then it can be challenging. This role can be very
Yeah.
challenging.
You have to be from a
But
certain like personality as well
yeah,
to
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And again, it goes back to my agency days. Like, clients would cancel mandates and clients would cancel roles, and unfortunately, you just have to take that on the chin
Yeah.
and move on and move forward. So I think the qualities that I would be looking for, so if I was to hire somebody for my replacement, would be, can they manage ambiguity? Can they manage
Mhm.
stakeholders? And are they resilient enough? Because this role is demanding and things change and
Definitely.
you're wearing multiple hats and multiple sort of having multiple discussions, and if you can't navigate around that, then it can be quite difficult
Yeah.
for you to make it a
Takes
success.
takes like a specific character to be hired
Yeah,
for this role. All right.
yeah,
I would like to thank you, Pritesh, for your time for this interview. Thank you so much. You've been
no
amazing
worries.
for letting me know about your job. And
Thank
yeah,
you.
thank you so much.
Good.